Did you get one of these?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Carter, do we want to wait for Mr. Hanley or get started with the? Want to get started? Do you want to have a discussion about the phones first, or we'll start with the rail trail? We'll go rail trail first. Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with our pre-meeting. So we'll start with rail trail towards Edna Kimball Wilkins. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. We have the opportunity to visit with the Trails Trust this evening. Ms. Emery is here to talk to us about a project opportunity that we have along the lines of the rail trail alignment to Edna Kimball Wilkins, and some granting opportunities. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, if I could defer to Ms. Emery.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Angela Emery. I'm the Executive Director of the Platte River Trails Trust, and I'm here this evening to discuss the extension of the Casper Rail Trail to Edna Kimball Wilkins State Park. As some of you may know, very shortly in 2021, the rail trail will extend in hard surfaced form to Curtis Street. We have done other work on the rail trail, including refurbishment of 3 small railroad trestles or bridges. So the trail is also gravelled and usable to Hat 6 Road. It's been a long-held desire to extend the rail trail to EKW. The City of Casper came to Platte River Trails Trust in 2002 and asked us for assistance to work on the rail trail. We have been doing that for the past 18 years. We now are at a point where we have an opportunity to go further all the way to the park. We have a donor who has given a significant amount of money to assist us with removal of a large concrete bridge. You can see it from the highway. You can see it from Old Glen Rock Highway. We've had an engineer survey the bridge. It is not usable. To refurbish it and keep it in its present form would cost $1 million, which we do not have. We don't really feel like the funds are appropriate to be spent in that way. So our plan is to take down the bridge, use some of the salvage from that removal to create a base for the trail, stay on the trail, and go all the way to the entrance to Edna Kimball Wilkins Park. So as I mentioned, we do have a major donor who has committed significant funds to assist us. We also plan to apply for a State of Wyoming Parks Recreational Trails Program grant this fall. This program is specifically for soft surface trails only, so we cannot access this funding for any of our other projects we have going on in town that are hard surface. It's meant only for soft surface. The Rails to Trails Conservancy has also offered to assist us, putting us in touch with a major donor they also are rolling out a grant opportunity this fall. Let me also say that our work here in central Wyoming dovetails with a Rails to Trails Conservancy effort to create a trail from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. A significant portion of the middle of that will come right through Wyoming and right through Casper. We feel like this is the kind of economic development that's low-hanging fruit for us. We would hope that people would want to travel through our state, stay here in Casper for at least a night, maybe more, eat a meal in a restaurant, and buy something at Lou Taubert's. So at any rate, we're here tonight to ask your permission to proceed with removal of the bridge, applying for the RTP grant, and doing further planning to hopefully start work in spring of 21.
Any questions or comments from council? Councilman Powell.
Thank you. Angela, without naming names, I assume you have all the easements in place that need to be there, and if so, are there some private property owners that should be given some credit for working with the trust on all of this?
Sure. Councilman Powell, that's an excellent question. I'm sorry that I didn't elucidate that at the beginning. The Casper Rail Trail is actually owned by the city of Casper. It was rail banked in 1998. Rail banking is a special kind of ownership that it derives from a piece of federal legislation that allows railroads to divest themselves of lines that are no longer in service. And so the city of Casper actually was starting to look at this line as early as 1972 when they realized that the line was going to be abandoned. There are rail trails all over the country that are like this. This happens to be one of the only ones in Wyoming, or maybe one of the first to be developed in this way. But it does belong to the city of Casper, so all of the rail trail that starts at Spruce Street and all the way to Curtis Street, excuse me, has been developed because the city of Casper rail banked the line. We will be going through, this rail line does travel through 2 state parcels, but because the city of Casper owns those, we do not believe we'll need to access a lease from the state to travel through those 2 parcels. We will need to access an easement from the state of Wyoming when we get to the entrance to EKW to pass from the rail trail corridor on the highway right-of-way before we get to YDOT's highway right-of-way. We have someone at State Parks who is very happy to help us with that process. We actually have 2 letters of support, one from State Parks and one from a gentleman who is a State Parks individual who actually lives at EKW. They're very interested in this project. They're very supportive of it. They want to see day use come into the park. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you for that explanation. Apparently, there were some people who preceded us that had some real foresight.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Councilman Kathy.
Along with that grant, does there have to be a match from the city?
No, no city match is required. We will use the private donation given to us and we'll call it out as a match for the RTP grant, even though there is no grant necessary for that either, no match for that grant either.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great program. I cannot resist, whenever the subject of Edna Kimball Wilkins comes up. She was a truly remarkable daughter of a Casper family. She was the executive secretary to the director of the U.S. Mint when she was like in her mid-20s. Went at an absolutely distinguished career here in Casper, serving in the legislature, and just was a truly wonderful, really community-spirited lady, and also ran the family ranch out there, which, and in those days, women just didn't run ranches. And she was just a truly remarkable lady, and I have always considered it a real privilege that I got to know her real well in my younger years. And I just couldn't resist saying some nice things about Edna.
Councilman Bates.
Back in the day, they didn't think that a railroad could be traveled from east to west coast. And then they weren't sure, as the plane developed, traveling by airplane from east to west coast. And obviously that was, that happened. So to hear a bike path going from east to west and it coming through Casper, coming right directly through Wyoming, I'm excited for it, and I hope to live to see it completed all the way through. So I'm excited for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, council. Appreciate
Thank you. Do you need direction from us or anything, or we good?
Mr. Mayor, I think at this point, we just need to prepare a resolution that supports the grant, and we'll bring that forward if council sees fit.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to agenda review. Anything that we need to go over, Mr. City Manager, before we start tonight?
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I would remind council of pertaining to tonight's meeting is that indeed we have prepared the script agenda to include the dismissal of the massage therapy ordinance on first reading this evening.
Okay. Councilman Cathy.
Was there a reason that the Ide subdivision was dropped? It was in the original packet that it was supposed to be read, and then we got a revised packet, only I wasn't able to really get it to download for me, so I don't know whether it's said or not, but yeah, we should have had it on third reading tonight.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cathy, you're correct. I am a little flat-footed as to why that might not be in the agenda this evening, but I can find out.
Okay.
Yep.
Just, I didn't know whether they'd run into snags or
I'm not sure.
what.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
We're good.
Anybody else with anything on the agenda review? Okay. And then I think we had one more discussion we were having about cell phone usage. So it was brought up as far as the perception that the public sees with us using cell phones up here, and so I put it out on the table of how everybody wants to deal with that, but I think that the public, in fact, doesn't. I mean, we have tablets here that we can utilize if we need to do research on anything that's taken place, but the public really doesn't know cell phone usage-wise what we're on our cell phones for. So I can somewhat understand the way that comes across to the public. So I guess I would like to have that discussion as to whether there's a need for cell phones to be in here during meetings, and if so, what that need would be. So, Councilman Cathy.
Basically, when I wind up using a cell phone here, it's normally from a job location, and if they're calling me from a job location, we have problems, because we've either got a drilling rig or a completion rig working in that area, and either one of those needs some immediate attention normally. So if it does beep, I will be at least looking to see who it is. If it's not a rig, I won't worry about it. If it is, and you see me get up and walk out, that's the reason why.
Okay. Vice Mayor Lutz.
On that same note, you can remember the night that was supposed to be my initial meeting. My son was life flighted to Denver, and so as you can imagine, I'm ultra paranoid about not having access to knowing where my kids are and that they're healthy and safe. So what we had discussed was potentially allowing, coworkers or family members to have Fleur's phone number and just letting them know that, if it's an emergency or it's something that you need me during this meeting, you need to call Fleur, and then she could enter the room and come and grab one of us.
Councilman Pacheco.
I understand the hesitation and having to do that, but for me, I think it'd be more of an opportunity as adults to self-regulate ourselves. And if we don't need to be on our phone scrolling for something, then I would stay off of it, keep it in your pocket, keep it on here, whatever it is. I'm more about self-regulation, and I think that would be a little bit more an opportunity for accountability. And so I don't want it to seem like we're, the teacher said, hey, put your phone in the basket and then go to class. I'd prefer, if we can be talked to as professionals, to say, just stay off your phone if you don't need to be on it. You've got your computer. You don't need to be scrolling through stuff. And I think if it continues to be an issue, then I would be next to say, then we need to make a policy to have these off the floor.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably for about the last 45 years, because of my affiliation with the Casper Mountain Fire Department, I have been on a pager tether, if you will, for fire calls. Now those calls all come in by way of cellular phones. I mute mine, and then I take it out and I set it here, and sometimes I pick it up and doodle with it, not looking at things. But I do that as a way of reminding myself that when the meeting's over, to turn the sound back up so that I'll get any of those pages. So if people have seen me sitting up here, flipping my phone around or anything, it's just, about like somebody had sit and play with a pen or something. And, but that's my reason for always having my cellular phone with me. And, you know, you talk about tethering someone, it is a tether.
Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything everyone else has said. We have lives outside of these chambers. We have families, we have small children, we have other business that we have to attend to. So, I mean, I get it, but I agree with Councilman Pacheco that it should be more of a self-regulated thing. And I see it kind of I don't know the word for it. I guess wasteful to have a city employee sitting by a landline waiting for somebody to call in for one of us. I just don't see that as a prudent use of city time.
Anybody else? Okay. I think as far as the clerk, I mean, she's here anyways, and that's why we said that she's gonna be next to her phone anyway, so she could notify us. But I guess I would ask that we just self-regulate then and make sure that these phones are muted, and if you have to attend to something, then attend to it. But I just don't want that bad perception out there that we're utilizing the devices to talk to somebody else outside of the meeting that's taking place. So, yeah, so we'll just run with it that way. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to Councilman Cathy's question, if I could, as is typical with annexation type requests of the council, we do delay the third reading to complete that annexation report. And so it's very consistent with the schedule that we typically see. I apologize that I wasn't able to bring that to bear when you asked, but that's the reason. Nothing's wrong.
Nope, that's very good then. But again, I don't know right now, and I'll find out, is a perfectly acceptable answer. That's wonderful, so, okay?
Okay, well, according to this clock, we're a minute ahead of time, but we'll go ahead and get started, so. Okay, before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones at this time. I now call the September 1st, 2020 regular council meeting to order. And all members are present. Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. So could you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on August 28th, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilman Cathy. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Bates. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the September 1st, 2020 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Bates. Any abstentions? Any abstentions or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Okay, we'll move to Bright Spots in Our Community, and it's for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. We're pleased to welcome Lisa Eads, Volunteer President and CEO of Jason's Friends Foundation, here tonight. Jason's Friends Foundation has asked for a proclamation acknowledging Childhood Cancer Awareness Month for 2020. Mrs. Eads, please come forward and share the information with us regarding this proclamation.
Thank you very much. I'm Lisa Eads here on behalf of Jason's Friends Foundation, and pleased that you guys are all proclaiming September Childhood Cancer Awareness Month for our community, and it's really happening throughout our state and throughout our country. The idea is to bring more awareness to what's happening and what we're doing for children throughout our community and throughout Wyoming and their families that are dealing with childhood cancer.
Thank you. Do you want to come up here and I'll read the proclamation?
How do I get to you?
So a proclamation, whereas after accidents, cancer is the second leading cause of death in children ages 1 to 14. About 1,190 children under the age of 15 are expected to die from cancer in 2020. And whereas, because of major treatment advances in recent decades, 84% of children with cancer now survive 5 years or more. Overall, this is a huge increase since the mid-1970s, when the 5-year survival rate was about 58%. And whereas, about 11,050 children in the United States under the age of 15 will be diagnosed with cancer in 2020. Childhood cancer rates have been rising slightly for the past few decades. And whereas possible late effects of cancer treatment include heart or lung problems due to certain chemotherapy drugs or radiation therapy to the chest area, slowed or delayed growth and development in the bones or overall, changes in sexual development and ability to have children, learning problems, and increased risk of other cancers later in life. And whereas, despite major advances in treatment, it is still critically important to increase awareness regarding pediatric cancer. And whereas, September is observed as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Now, therefore, I, Stephen K. Friel, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in this community and encourage all of our citizens to help raise awareness of pediatric cancer and its victims. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause this official seal of the City of Casper to be affixed this first day of September 2020.
Mr. Mayor, can I say something before we finish this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You know, we have other people in our community who have taken personal tragedies and rather than let it defeat them, have tried to find a way to do something positive for the community in response to that tragedy. No one has done a better job of that than the Eads, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
You two can actually sit next to each other.
Okay, now is the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions, comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to our city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. Presentations will be limited to 5 minutes and duplication of speakers will not be allowed, nor will time extensions be permitted. Please note the public hearings and ordinance each have their own comment period. Please hold your comments on those items until we reach them. Is there anybody that would like to come down and talk to council? Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm not familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. order or anything. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions concerning the feral cat and dog feeding ban. And I'm speaking with you, yes, sir?
Yes.
If you make it a crime to feed feral cats and dogs, and they are eradicated due to that starvation, what are you going to do when the rat and mice and rabbit and squirrel and bird populations explode, all of which are vectors for carrying communicable diseases?
Okay, sir, first of all, I would ask that you hold those comments until we get to that portion of the,
Oh, I thought that's what we were doing, sir. I apologize.
no, we'll get to the reading of the animal ordinance later, so if you want to come up and talk about it at that time, you most certainly can.
Please excuse me. I'll
No
sit
problem.
back down.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come up and talk to council? Okay. And we'll move on to establishing dates of public hearing for the Code of Ethics. Please read the consent agenda title.
Establishing September 15th, 2020 as the public hearing date and first reading for consideration of an ordinance amending Section 2.60.050 to the Code of Ethics of the Casper Municipal Code.
Chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Cathy,
Second.
second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye. Aye. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of amendments to the wastewater sewage discharge regulations. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Thank you, Mayor. We have one exhibit tonight. It is a correspondence from Andrew Beamer to J. Carter Napier dated August 24, 2020. That's our only exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The industrial pretreatment program is a program required by the Clean Water Act, and periodically, the EPA requires that local limits be reassessed and potentially reset, if you will, by virtue of an ordinance supporting the same. We are at that period in time where the EPA has directed that some different levels be put into place. Council will be pleased to know that despite those changes, the wastewater treatment plant will still be well within those limitations, as will the majority of all of our industrial users, if you will. The difference that we will see with respect to this particular reading process that we typically experience and support, the EPA does require a 30-day public notice period, wherein they will also have a public hearing, if you will, pending the results of that portion of the public dialogue. We would get notice, after which a second and third reading would then be scheduled. So there will be a delay in the reading process as it relates to this ordinance pursuant to the additional hearings required by the Clean Water Act.
Okay, thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the regulations, please approach the lectern. No. No. Okay, so at this time, I would ask those individuals to speak in opposition to the issues involving the regulations, please approach the lectern. All right, there being no one to speak for or against the issues involving the regulations, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance amending Section 13.32.030 of Chapter 13.32 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to Division 3 wastewater sewer discharge regulations.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Bate. Discussion? Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
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 Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
At the August 25th, 2020 work session, the City Council indicated that they would like to table the public hearing and first reading of the massage therapy license and permit ordinance in order to allow for further discussion of this item at the next work session on September 8th of 2020. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, table the public hearing for the massage therapy license and permit ordinance.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Cathy. Any abstention or nay votes?
Mr. Mayor, if I could real quick.
Yes, sir.
It would be my understanding that this would also table the first reading, and the motion did not necessarily include that. Just want to be sure that the chair was comfortable with that.
Okay, yeah, because the first hearing was tonight, correct? All right. So we're, just to make it clear, we're tabling this to the next work session and tabling the first reading of this, which would go to our next council session, correct? The second meeting of the month?
Mr. Mayor, pending the conversation in the work session, we would take direction at that point.
Okay. All right. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance updating and amending Chapter 6.04 of the Casper Municipal Code, Animal Care and Control.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins. Second by Councilman Huber. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Now is for the animal ordinance, so you can come forward now. Yes.
My apologies. Would you like me to reiterate the initial question?
If you want to, you can.
Okay. This starvation program on,
Let me stop you just for a second. Councilman Bates.
Name and address.
Yes.
oh, I apologize. Michael W. Hamel, Hamel, 2504 Bonnie Bray Street.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
May I lower this, please?
You may, yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what's going to happen when you institute this ban on feeding feral cats and dogs. There's so many things that can happen. If they are eradicated in such a manner, the population of birds, rats, mice, squirrels, and others are going to explode. And all of those animals are known vectors of infectious and communicable diseases. Feral cats and dogs, just like any other cats and dogs, have a divine instinct and a predatory nature. They keep the populations of others down and regulated naturally. If you starve animals just because they're feral, it's inhumane. It's a bit sadistic, sir. And what are you going to do when it comes about that some child is attacked by one of these starving animals? Because all they know is that their stomach is chewing on their backbone. And it would probably be a simple reactionary thing from the animal. Someone's very likely going to get hurt, and I wonder if the city is ready for that type of litigation. I don't know how long I have. I'm just curious about these things, Mayor Friel.
Okay. Anybody have any comments they'd like to make?
That's it? May I make one observation with no insult intended, sir?
Sure.
You have the wrong emblem on the top of your flagstaff.
Okay, thank you.
Have a nice day. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Linda Terrell, 2250 East 3rd Street, Casper, Wyoming. First, I just want to thank the mayor and the council for the consideration you've given on these important subjects. I am going to ask you, and I guess the word plead is the best I can come up with right now, for giving serious consideration to a no unintended tethering. I just think that is the way to go. I want to thank Councilman Bates for his very well-intentioned efforts towards compromise, but I believe this is the best for the community and for the animals. I have an ordinance from another county that went from a timed ordinance to, or timed tethering, excuse me, to a, to an unattended, no unattended tethering, and they could not enforce their timed tethering. They found this was much easier to enforce, and they received much fewer calls. So I think it would save the city money and time. I know that the council does not want to condone abuse, cruelty, or neglect intentionally, nor do you want to starve animals. I don't believe that for 2 seconds. I watch your work sessions, and I thank you so much. You guys spend a lot of time on this. You take it very seriously, and that is appreciated. I want to touch on a comment from the work session from Councilman Cathy. As far as having to side with animals or people, he will always side with the people. My thought is we take care of both. We can take care of both the people and the animals. They're both a part of the situation. The reason we have feral cats is because of irresponsible pet owners. It's not the cats that go out and run around. They're turned loose. People don't spay and neuter, and then we just are overrun with cats. So a TNR is also something I'm pleading for you to give us the opportunity to work on. I have a question for Mayor Friel. Is that fine? You mentioned in the work session having known someone in the past who tried a TNR. I think it was 8 years ago or something you mentioned.
Yes.
Have you had the opportunity to talk to this person and see perhaps what went wrong or why it didn't work before?
No, I didn't, but what I referred to was 2011. It was an article that I actually had in a box that I was going through at home, and it talked about the TNR program, but it was not a local. There was not a local TNR. It was not a local vet. It was a vet that actually came in, and they did that for many years. You would have a veterinarian that would come in and donate their time. Sometimes they would charge, but they would go up to Metro and they would do TNR up there. That's what I was referring to.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. That clarifies that better for us. And we just thought if we could find out what didn't work before, we could make it work better this time. I think that with all the backing we have right now with, Alley-Cat Allies, that we're in a much better place to have a TNR program. We've got an organized effort. We're trying to do an organized effort between city, metro, local advocates, the Humane Society. The Humane Society has chosen to partner with Best Friends Animal Society out of Utah so that we can get on their grant cycle, which would hopefully give us some funds to move forward with the TNRs so that the city's not looking at any expense. That's the direction we want to take. I just think in conclusion that I would ask you again to table these two very important issues and make sure that we make the right choices, that we give people the time to do a TNR. It's not going to happen overnight. We want it to be done right. And again, as I said, this is for the community. This is for the people and the animals. It's not just an animal problem, it's a people problem. And we need to start looking at it that way. I would love to be able to share the information I have on the ordinance from this other county on a no unattended tether and show you that language. I would like to have the time to do that. So that's what I'm asking you for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Vice Mayor Lutz.
Are you working directly with Alley-Cat Allies? Have they made a donation in order for you guys to start the program?
We're not there yet, but they have certainly put a lot of funds into working towards that.
Okay, outside of city council and as a concerned citizen, I find it interesting that they would spend money on billboards and things of that nature without making a donation to the program itself that they're advocating for.
I think it's a process.
Okay, as long as that money's coming, I guess that would make sense to me.
That honestly, Alley-Cat Allies is probably very well funded. They've helped us a ton, and I think they've brought it to national attention, and I do believe very strongly they'll continue to help us. And we're looking at other options too for funding grants, and like I said, through the Best Friends Animal Society as well. So, thank you.
And Linda, that was kind of the same question that I was going to have too, is whether or not they were because obviously they're backing you in your efforts here. And not only the billboards, but each and every one of us have received all the emails. And, you know, I really got to, it's the same email. A couple of people put in the different line in there, but it's the same email. But the thing I found interesting is that I would say maybe a very, very small percent, if 1%, actually reside in Wyoming. And I didn't find a lot of them that reside in Casper. The only one I really found was Burns, but the rest of them are Nevada, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. These are people from all over the United States that are sending us an email, the exact same email here. So if they're going to put their efforts together to assist you here, I would hope that they would back you funding-wise to get a TNR program together if that's what you're looking to do.
And I'm sorry, I did not know that those letters were coming from all over the place. I thought that alert was just sent to our area, so I.
No, they're, and I'd be more than happy to share them with you. It's the same letter, and you name a state, it's, somebody sent one to us, so.
Did not know that.
And at least 3 foreign countries.
Oh, good.
There was one from South Africa, one from London, a couple from provinces in Canada. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? You got animal lovers everywhere, so.
You do.
That's all I can
That
tell
may
you.
be, but
Well, I know it has no effect on this. I understand that, and I apologize for that. But I had no control over that, and neither did they, so.
No, and don't take it wrong. I'm not saying that, you know, yeah, we get inundated with emails and it's the same one and we get the message. I guess the point I'm trying to say is they all say alleycat.org on them. And if that organization is that set in helping people out and getting the word out, I would certainly hope that they would step up to the plate to help out in doing exactly what you want to do. You want to get a TNR program in place, then they need to, they're putting a lot of time and effort and money into billboards that they could be putting into a TNR program and resolving a problem. And that's all that I think any of us want is a resolution to a problem. Not to come and tell us that we're doing it wrong and we're starving animals, because that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a resolution to a problem, and that's what we're asking for, is somebody to step up and give us a resolution. And to me, the amount of money and the amount of effort that's being put in to let us know that they don't like the idea of starving animals could be put into a TNR program and take care of this problem altogether.
And I totally agree with you. I think their idea was they needed to get the message out there so that people knew this was happening here, to get us going in the direction of a TNR program. And then I think, and I'll have more conversation with them about that, but I totally understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Totally understand.
Councilman Hopkins.
Just a quick comment, kind of along similar lines. I did receive the one from South Africa, and the next farthest one I got as far as away from Casper would be London, but there were hundreds of them. And what I might suggest is that, you know, everybody was out front, and there's lots of places you can get together and have a meeting, the library for one. And to see some organization actually do that and just pass the sheet around, say, who are you? Will you come to the meeting at the library? And then you can put the thing in the paper. It doesn't cost anything. And you say, we're going to have an organizational meeting to do a TNR program in Casper and provide some funding mechanism for it. I think that's the obvious way to go. I don't think the taxpayers in Casper, I don't know how many taxpayers in Casper own pets, but I'd venture to say it's not half.
Oh,
But it may be a lot of people, they may want to do it, but I would think that would be a relatively easy thing to do. I mean, a lot of organizations just put something in the paper and they have a meeting in the library, or other venues for that matter.
and that is certainly a step in the process. I would agree with you. I think that we didn't know if we were going to be able to get this feeding ban voted down. We can't have a feeding ban and have a TNR program. The two do not work together, because you cannot trap a cat if you can't feed it. You can't get it trapped, you can't take it and spay and neuter if you can't feed it. So the two don't work together. And I think that was the idea, was we have to get to where we know that the council is going to vote that down so that we can then move forward with a TNR. I think that's where their efforts were put, was to try to get that moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I may have a follow-up too. I got one other letter that was pretty upsetting. It was from a lady, I believe in California. She volunteers 2 days a week and feeds 75 cats. Now, if that were beside my house, what will I have to protect my property from somebody doing that kind of a thing?
Well, I will tell you that I know someone who lives very close to a feral cat colony, and feral cats stay where they get fed. These people are not
Well, that's
affected.
only 60 feet wide.
Can I finish, please? Thank you.
Certainly.
It's two houses down, and cats are not bothering the neighbors because they are being fed and they have shelter, and that's where feral cats stay, if they're true feral cats. You can have stray cats. You can have a neighbor who's not taking care of their cats and being responsible.
Okay.
No, I mean, it is. There's a lot of difference here. They're not just feral cats that you're seeing. They can be stray cats or they can be irresponsible pet owners who are letting their cats run around. But feral cats, true feral cats, if they're being fed and they have shelter, they don't want to be around people.
Councilman Pacheco.
So, I mean, do we have 75 cats? Is that from Casper?
I don't know of any place where there's.
I don't think that's happening here in Casper, but I think there's a controllable issue that we can deal with it. And I think you guys coming forward and passionate, whether the emails are coming from wherever, was it a little bit of annoyance? Yeah. But I get where you guys are coming from to sit and say, look, this is what we're believing in. So I feel like I don't want it to be misinterpreted if you feel like you're being scolded by the council, because that's the last thing. I had to stand up in front of the school board, and it's daunting last week.
Yeah.
And I understand how very scary it can be when we have people that are in position of power talking to you. So number one, thank you for being here and talking about what you're trying to change in our community. And as for people standing in front of the building, this building, protesting, that's your right to do that. So it's okay. You can protest and you can stand out there to do those things, to do that. So that's my point, and I want to get that across to you guys as you're coming up here. It's scary, I get it, and you have something in the community you want to change. So I appreciate that for you coming up here and doing that. We'll figure something. We're gonna have to make a change or a difference somewhere in that. This may not be it, we don't know, but I want to make sure you guys understand that.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that. And I'm a big girl. I'm a big girl. I can take a scolding if I have to, but we're very passionate about the animals. I'm very passionate about the tethering issue. That's a big deal to me, and I can't stress to you enough how important it is to at least look at the language in the ordinance to know what we can do. Oh, these were the two dogs in Evansville that we started this process with 5 years ago. They were on chains 24/7 in deplorable conditions, and we couldn't get anything done. They eventually were taken away because they were vicious and they were euthanized. So I don't want to see that happen, and I don't want to see a child wander into a yard and be killed and then have us decide, wow, you know what, maybe we should have changed that law. I'm not trying to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I'm not trying to bully anybody or use a scare tactic, but it happens. It's happened in Jacksonville, and that's when they changed their law. I don't want a tragedy like that to happen to a child or to anyone else.
Okay. Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo what Councilman Pacheco just said. I appreciate it's tough to come in here, and we're not yelling at you or anybody else. But I do have to say it's particularly not helpful to get flooded by the same email. And I spent about 2 hours, and I'm not yelling, please no, ma'am, I'm just putting this on the record. I spent about 2 hours today sitting there deleting emails from all over the country. And the interesting thing is they all ended with saying, listen to the citizens of Casper about what they want about this. And that was, you know, it was not real helpful. But I really do want to agree with you when you talk about, you know, when we talk about animals and we talk about people, they are not mutually exclusive issues. We need to worry about people and we need to worry about animals. And when I look at situations like what you're depicting there on your poster, I see not only an animal and an animal protection problem, but I see people problems going on there too. Absolutely. And I think that you are absolutely correct that we need to, and they're not mutually exclusive, we need to look at the whole picture there and try to take care of our people as well as the creatures that depend on us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate all of those remarks.
Councilman Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Earl, first off, I got all the same emails. I think that is the process, and I don't mind people from Canada or wherever, you know, expressing their opinions. I think one of the concerns that I have is that I guess I mentioned some of the adjectives last week that, you know, the name calling essentially aimed at us, and I would say most of the people if I could use a word, they were flabbergasted that we would even consider a feeding ban. And that TNR is an absolutely positive program wherever it's been implemented. Well, that's not, and then it's universally accepted. Well, that's not really true. And, I mean, are you aware of the fact that the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, an organization with a membership of 6.5 million people, regard TNR as dangerous and inhumane? And they say that, they point out that the feces of cats who roam deposit their feces in children's sandboxes near creeks, that they carry parasites dangerous to humans. Parasites are often found in the excrement of cats who are allowed to roam, and they list a number of them. We had a case of the plague in KC. They quote the National Association of State Public Health Veterinarians, who state, and I quote, "No evidence exists that maintained cat colonies adequately reduce human public health risks or appropriately address their impact on pets or native wildlife." And they go on to say, stray dogs, cats, and ferrets should be removed from the community, which is what we have been doing. And mechanisms should be in place to facilitate voluntary surrender of animals. And I believe PETA takes the stance that if a TNR program is in place, that increases the likelihood that people will abandon their cats because their cats will then be taken care of by individuals who care for stray cats. And I'm not saying this because I agree entirely with their stance, but I guess the point is that this is not a non-controversial solution.
No.
And that there are different points of view about this. And all of these emails, I mean, they just can't believe that we would consider a feeding ban. Are you and the people supporting this aware of the fact that we are killing 500 cats every year?
Why
And,
TNR?
well, that may be the case, but of course, those cats are still going to be where they shouldn't be, and they will still be trapped and retrapped and re-released, apparently. So I'm not saying that TNR it cannot be effective, but the idea that this is a black and white issue is simply incorrect. And there are some very strong arguments for not doing TNR and to basically not feed these animals. So, and so I assume you're aware then that there are other points of view about this.
Oh, absolutely. Sure, there always is. You can't have a complicated issue and have it be black and white.
You wouldn't guess that from the emails.
I'm sorry. Well, I don't have control of it.
And that's okay.
I don't condone name calling. I have done everything I can to be respectful to everyone, and I feel like I have been treated with respect. I don't condone those things.
And I'm
sorry that happened.
And I'm not trying to put you in that position.
No, I know.
But I am trying to point out to people that people who just can't believe that we would consider this are simply looking at one viewpoint of this problem.
Okay, and you're all also aware that PETA does not condone hunting, does not condone rodeos.
True.
So, and I mean, what do we do in Wyoming? We do a lot of hunting and we do a lot of rodeos. So then the article, I believe this was in Oil City News, I'm not sure.
No, it's on PETA.
Oh, it's on PETA.
I'm not
okay.
a member of PETA.
Okay, this is on PETA.org, I'm sorry. Nevertheless, PETA's position has never been that all feral cats should be euthanized. We believe that trap, vaccinate, spay, neuter, and release or return programs are acceptable when the cats are isolated from roads, people, and other animals who could harm them, regularly attended to by people who not only feed them, but care for their medical needs and situated in an area where they do not have access to wildlife and where the weather is temperate, which we don't have that here. But so that's what we want to do. And I think that you can find a lot of different opinions, but I guess give us a chance. Because it has worked, and there are communities around Wyoming where it's working right now. Let's give Casper people a chance. And again, I've got to throw my tethering in there because that is a big deal to me. I do not want to watch animals die like this or become vicious or hurt a child. Tethering is just dangerous all the way around.
I mean, if I follow it, I guess a question about that. Would that be acceptable under the ordinance that we're looking at?
This was when it was a 10-hour.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, what?
This is what Metro told us. They couldn't do anything.
They couldn't
about
do
these
anything
dogs.
about
These-
this.
These dogs were, these people were following all the rules of the ordinances.
They said.
The current ordinances. The only thing that we changed was the time limit. So yes, this is acceptable under your ordinances.
And they're.
The ordinance,
food, they
the
never had
ordinance with,
water.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry.
It would comply with the ordinance the way it has been modified?
No, this would not comply.
Not to the 2 hours, but nothing else was changed.
Right, right. It was 10 hours, then we changed it to 2 hours because of this situation, because we were told 10 hours could not be enforced. And they could do nothing for these animals.
No, you're good. Councilman Kathy.
Is the other side a close-up of the two dogs?
No, the other side is just some other pictures of tethered animals.
I was going to say, turn the sign over.
Okay.
There you go. Basically, they're undernourished. The food and the water are not non-spillable. So yes, all of those pictures are in violation of.
So was the other one. So, yeah,
That
all
was
of
the
those.
point I wanted to make. That's
Absolutely,
what-
and we could not get anything done at all. So that is my fear, that that's what we're looking at again.
But those right there fall under the cruel
Right.
part of the ordinance.
Right, but if you don't consider tethering to be cruel, I mean, I think that's a big question.
Tethering doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're malnutrition and they don't have food and water.
It does, because they're put out there and they're forgotten. That's why they're malnourished, that's why they don't have water, and that's why they don't have food. They're tied on a chain. People say, well, don't have to deal with them, and it happens every single day.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Ariano Brio, 4517 East 18th. And I've sent you guys emails. Does my name sound familiar at all? I'm from Casper. I've sent several.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, ma'am, if you could talk a little closer to the microphone, I can't hear
Hard
you.
for me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so my name's Laura Ariano Brio, and I live in Casper. I sent emails to y'all. First of all, I want to point out, I realize you've received a lot of emails. I'm sorry, I'm just supposed to look at you. I know you guys have received a lot of emails from all over the country, but you got to realize those are the people that are donating to these programs that we're going to be asking for funding. That's where the money comes from. So those people writing to you, just know that, they play an important part of this. They're advocates as well. And again, a feeding ban and TNR, they don't go hand in hand. I'm one person. I can manage one colony, but I would rely on caretakers for information. Say, how many kittens do you got? We trap the kittens. We get them out of there. We rehome them. I mean, it's a process. I so wish there was data that you guys had that showed those numbers that Metro has for cat euthanizations and how those numbers would actually look if not for the efforts already being done in this community. I know that data, it's impossible to have it. So if you guys don't vote for the feeding ban, we put that down, you give us a chance, that'll give us time to actually start gathering data. Because that's all that work is lost. You guys don't even see it. I didn't even know it was happening. I thought like I was the Lone Ranger out there doing this, but there's a lot of people doing it. So with that, I just like hearing what you're saying here. The ideas that you mentioned, Mr. Hopkins, same ideas out here. We need to map out the colonies. We need to get together. We need to organize. We need to have meetings. I want monthly meetings. All that is just, we're not there yet. We can't get there with this feeding ban in place. So I'm just asking for the opportunity to let us organize and try this. It's, a lot of the information I think that's being pulled up is dated. TNR's come a long way. It's 2020. We have the internet, we have Facebook, we have funding, we have all these different things that we can use today. So I think that we have a better shot than we did maybe 7 years ago. And with that, I just want to say thank you and questions?
Ma'am, I would like to just follow up on what you said. That was my question earlier, is that the amount of letters we get, and I'm not complaining about the amount of letters, and they're from people from all over. But if there's that much, support behind this, are those people giving you funding? That's the question. And that's what I'm saying, is if they're gonna put that much effort into sending letters to us from all over the world, apparently, not just the United States, but all over the world, to tell us that what we're doing is wrong, and put up billboards and be involved, I think that money could be much better used funding what you're trying to do.
I agree, but we have to fight the feeding ban first. We have to, you know, that's why we're advocating for you guys to just put the brakes on this. There's a better way, is what we're saying. Yeah, I would love to take all that money and use it on spay and neuters, but let's stop, you know, the feeding ban first and then work on that part of it. And that's going to take time. It's not, I say it's like a diet pill. I wish there was a pill I could take and I'd lose 10 pounds overnight. That doesn't happen. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. But there's enough people out here, I think, that we could do it.
Any comments from council? Councilman Bates.
Ms. Laura, your very first comment was, you introduced yourself and you said you would recognize me because you received many of my emails. Did you receive mine?
I did.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, and I know you did because we've talked several times over it. One thing I do want to point out, regarding stopping the feeding ban, and you guys, you know, I've been supportive of TNR, and I've made amendments and everything for it, but tabling, I go off of what everybody's been saying. With the money of the billboards, how much louder would it have spoke if everybody came up and said, they gave us the money to start it? You want us to stop the feeding ban, then look at the TNR and try to gather the money and this and that. How much louder would it speak to everybody here and everybody that's watching on YouTube and TV, and it's going to be on Facebook and news and everything else? How much louder would have it spoke if you guys came up and said, hey, Alley Katz donated $10,000 to start this?
We don't have a program yet. That's what we're saying. We don't have that.
But if they provided the money now, or like before they even did the build, would you have the program now?
I don't know that Alley Cat Allies would be the donate. Best Friends is actually known for doing that. There's other advocacy groups, so you have to apply for that. Petco, they're everywhere. So if we have a 501c3, which I haven't applied for yet, I mean, that's what it takes. It's a process. That's why I said it's not going to happen overnight, but we can get there.
Right. How long have we been going through this?
Through what?
Through this whole animal care ordinance about the feeding ban.
There's a lot of people doing TNR in the city of Casper.
How long have we been discussing this? How much time did they need to donate the money to get this, or for you guys to file? I'm not against John. I'm just pointing out that we've been going through this for a month and a half, 2 months, that you guys want it. We got flooded with emails, and I've answered every email except for the ones today, because I haven't had a chance to. But every single email I have responded back to. Every phone call. From California, I got a phone call regarding this. New York, I got a phone call regarding this. And Florida, I got a phone call. Talked to them all about it. But what I'm saying is, these groups, these people, if you guys would have filed for this, and on this third reading you came back and you said, we've had this amount of people donate $1. I've probably received over 100 emails. That's $100 that could have came into you guys. Exactly. And you could come right now and say, we have this much money. So I'm pointing out that it would have spoke louder if you came back and said, we have this much money from all these people. So that's all I'm saying.
While I was out in the community speaking with people, you know how many people wanted to donate? What do? Say, write a check to Laura Ariano Brio. You know, I have no program. So I would have loved to take the donation. So I asked them, you know, to donate to locals around here in the meantime. But if I go out and campaign for this, I'm going to ask for donations. I'll take that money. It'll be used for this program. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had an easier answer. But, you know, my dream was I could just walk in here and say, hey, guys, I won the lottery, starting TNR today. But I guarantee you that if this feeding ban does not pass, I will be on it tomorrow. I give you my word.
Councilman Johnson.
I just want to say that we got a huge jump start on the general public. I mean, they weren't even aware of this until the second reading. And so it takes time for groups like this to get things together and set up 501c3s or whatever else they have to do. So to say that they should have been receiving money, they had no idea that we were even going to do this until after the second reading. And I was the only no vote on this ordinance. This thing would have been pushed through the third reading without any opposition. And so to say that these people should have had this stuff set up before even the first reading is ridiculous to me because they didn't know about it. And then Alley Cat Allies got involved, and then they put billboards up because they're trying to gain public awareness to say, hey, stop this so we can group and get some things set up for this. So I just find it ludicrous that we're kind of berating these people for not setting something up when they had no idea until the second reading that this was happening.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Huber.
I'd like to rise to a little bit of a point of order here. These nice people are coming forward and offering their comments and everything. I think that, and to some extent probably I'm guilty as anybody, but it's almost like we're cross-examining them and grilling them and everything. This is supposed to be a public comment opportunity, and I know that you know, sometimes a little bit of question and answer is in order and a good idea. But I really would like to rise to a point of order that I think that we're, in essence, grilling and cross-examining these people in a bit of an unfair manner, and I would ask that you so rule and that we move forward and allow these nice people to come in and offer their comments and their input, and then we'll move forward on this.
Okay.
And when I say move forward, I mean move forward to our deliberations. I'm not saying we're just going to steamroll over everything like you guys say.
Can I say one thing just to Mr. Bates? Just so you know, I spent thousands of dollars of my own money managing one colony. So if that counts for anything.
Obviously with me,
And driving back and forth all over Denver, Sheridan, taking kittens. I mean, it's exhausting and working full time. So to have volunteers and a community effort and other people, that would be really great.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. We'll get you up here yet.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I rise in defense of Alley Cat Allies.
Could we get your name and address, ma'am?
I'm sorry,
That's
Kathy
okay.
Reynolds, 2633 South Kaufman. I'd like to defend Alley Cat Allies. I've been a supporter of theirs for many years. The message they're trying to send you from London, from South Africa, from California is to say, this doesn't work. It didn't work anyplace else and it won't work here. And that's what they're trying to say to you. You're right, Councilman Johnson, we didn't know about this until second reading. So we are trying and scrambling to get organized and try to put something in place and get going on it. As Laura has said, I also have spent several $1,000s over several years in Casper on a colony, managing kittens and having spayed and neutered and feeding. Managing a colony in place that holds their place because they're territorial, and that's how it works. I would like to say that also, Mr. Powell, that I can come up with as many statistics as you can in support or against these programs. It takes a mixture of all these different efforts in order to get it done. This has gone on for many years. These cats are not, they were not started in Wyoming. People brought them here. They caused it, and it's been going on a long time, and it'll take a while to solve it. That doesn't mean it can't be done. I would also tell you that we have an anonymous donation of $5,000 to get this started. So that's all I can say. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
My name's Angela Clement, but people know me as Nella Forrest in this town because that's my writing and my Wiccan name. And I would like, other people have brought, other reasoning to here, science, community organization, that sort of thing. I would like to bring religion back on this because first of all, I would like to say that I almost have my master's degree at the University of Wyoming for Health Services Administration. And I tell you that, some of the stray dogs in my area, which I forgot to mention my address, it's 1515 East 24th Street. There's plenty of, I wouldn't call them stray, just off the leash, right? They come into my yard, other yards, and I mean, there's plenty of fecal matter from dogs. But what I want to say is I really feel, this is how I feel, okay? When I just heard about all this. But what came to my mind is this is a witch hunt. And the reason why is because it's against my religion to not feed cats sometimes because Ovid, many people have heard of Ovid. By the way, I also run the Hellenist Pagan group on Facebook, and I've been a high priestess for over 20 years, a Wiccan high priestess and a Hellenist high priestess. And in Ovid, the goddess Diana turned into a cat. So a lot of times, pagans will give offerings to cats. And you don't know if it's the neighbor's cat. I wouldn't know if it's some neighbor's black cat or whatever. If they come into my yard, why can't I feed them? It really, in Ovid, Diana it also has, Pseudo-Hyginus Astronomica 2.28. What happened was the gods were terrified of the monster Typhon, and they changed forms. Oh, that's how Diana became a cat. So I just want to also remind you that nearly 40,000 people applied for a cat sanctuary in Greece. They all volunteered. They got it done. Okay? Instead of having even Metro, if you want, we could have a community-based volunteer program. You could ask, for example, the University of Wyoming, or anybody could ask the University of Wyoming to help. They have, don't they have a veterans or a veterinarians program? I mean, there's all kinds of people religiously and I mean, gee, volunteers from the university that would probably help. I know that a lot of people in the metaphysical community would definitely help with this. We haven't had enough time to organize anything. Personally, I have thought about starting a business even. I mean, does it have to be 501c3? I don't know. But with 501c3, I'm not too sure if people could just get donations and then go get the 501c3 license. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. But like Mary Ann, I believe of Poverty Resistance, I'm not too sure, but I thought that it's not a 501c3 thing. She just went out and got a business license. And so why couldn't somebody do that? I was personally thinking about starting a business called Black Cat Lives Matter, and, do some things for the community. But all this does take time. And I would like to request that everybody think about this because this does affect the lives of metaphysical people. It certainly me. And if my black cat got out, I mean, I guess I could get it like chipped or whatever in the ear and stuff, but gee, if it got lost, I mean, I wouldn't want it to starve and die. I think this is ridiculous. I'm sorry. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, any comments from council? Questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just really quick, to whoever out there is planning on organizing this group, the reason you want to be a 501c3 is so that donations made to your group are then tax deductible by the donator. That's why you would be a 501c3 versus a for-profit business.
Hello, Sandra Materi, 1600 West Odell. I have a few comments on tethering. Dogs that are continuously tethered endure physical ailments. Their necks become raw and sore, and collars can grow painfully into their skin. This can also occur with the use of a harness. Any type of strap continually rubbing will cause painful sores that steadily worsen. They are vulnerable to insect bites and parasites, more so than a dog that is kept in a house or lives with people. Tethered dogs are at high risk of entanglement, strangulation, harassment, or attacks by other dogs or people. They are unable to escape anything and are forced to endure everything. Even when an area is free of obstacles, dogs can tangle their own limbs in the chain, potentially losing the limb or strangle themselves. Tangling can also prevent them from reaching water and shelter. Tethered dogs also suffer from irregular feedings, overturned water bowls, inadequate veterinary care, and extreme weather and temperatures. Spill-proof bowls are not guaranteed not to spill. A dragging tether can still dump all or most of the water and force the dog to endure several hours without water. A tethered dog is simply easier to ignore. It's easy to say, "I'll get to it later," and not see the dog's needs for several hours or even days. Owners who chain their dogs are less likely to clean the area and often force the dog to eat and sleep in close proximity to urine and feces. Besides making the dog filthy and smelly, urine and feces are damaging to the skin and can cause painful infected sores. Dogs can also get fly strike when flies are attracted by the smell and lay eggs on them, resulting in maggots under the skin. The life of a tethered dog is wretched. More communities around the United States are realizing this and requiring pet owners to find a better alternative. Casper could show everyone right now that we are a progressive and compassionate community by enacting a no tethering law. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
My name is Haley Dawson, and I live on 106 Primrose Street. I'm rather new to my own stance on this matter, but I've formulated a pretty strong opinion that obviously it's good that the majority of us are on the same page on the fact that TNR is good and it does offer an effective way of controlling populations of cats and whatever, but really, I mean, if you look at how the process is done, you can't have it without feeding them. And if I were to partake in TNR myself, I would like to do that without feeling threatened that I'm going to be fined in order to do that. So that is my take on it. It's just hard to do that without the other thing, and I do believe that lifting that ban is a rather large step that can help that population be controlled. I do feel like the population might not be as easily controlled if we are focusing too much on not feeding them and then being like, okay, well, now we have to trap these cats, make sure they're neutered and everything. I feel like those two components together can make it more effective rather than having one without the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council or comments?
Hello, I'm Jamie Jenkins. You guys have probably heard my name in some of the emails as well. My address is 6625 Cherokee Lane. I'm the founder of Temporary Home Animal Rescue. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I've been a 501c3 since 2012. And I mostly work with Metro Animal Control. I used to take a lot of the kitties out of the community, dogs as well, but I have focused completely on our shelter. I have taken over 2,200 cats and dogs from Metro Animal Control. We've taken them into foster care. We have partnerships with PetSmart and Petco. So if you guys ever go in there and you see the kitties for adoption, that's from our city shelter. I also do transports to all over Wyoming and to other no-kill rescues, Colorado and Utah. In fact, tomorrow I am taking 30 of Metro's cats with me to no-kill rescues in Colorado. So when your guys' city shelter gets full, I usually am the one that comes in. I find places for those guys to go where they go get spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and then put into no-kill rescues. So 300 of the over 2,200 that I've taken from Metro have been deemed feral. We started a barn home program in Casper. We take them, we spay and neuter them, vaccinate them, ear tip them, and then we actually adopt them into homes with ranchers or in rural areas to keep the population of mice down. So that is what the program has done. I already have the 501c3. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Second Chance. They're the largest cat rescue in Wyoming. And they are helping me to write grants as we speak. So we're waiting on those grants. They have a time where they open, and they're not opening until about a month out. The one that we're looking at right now is through Petco. It's a $25,000 grant that for spay and neuter specifically, but you can use it for TNR. It doesn't matter if they're wild cats in our community or if they were just Metro cats. And that, we've got a low-cost option, $35 for a neuter and $50 for a spay, $16 for a full set of shots, which is including rabies. And so with that $25,000 on this grant that we could be receiving in the next month, we would be able to do well over 400 surgeries. To get this off the ground immediately. We're talking in the next few months. As others have said, that, we need time. We still are looking at getting equipment that we would need for trapping, volunteers. The clinic that we have sought after with this low cost, they can do 20 cats in a day. Which is huge. The majority of the clinics, usually they can only schedule 3 to 5 surgeries a day. This clinic can do 20. So we could knock these surgeries out in a really small time frame if we could get the volunteers and everybody to stand behind us. So I just wanted to let you guys know that because I know there was some talk about the 501c3 and it does take time. Those do get kicked back a lot. Sometimes over and over they get rejected, but I do have the 501c3 in place. I've been working with Metro. I actually spoke yesterday with Tiffany Hyde, which is one of the Metro officers. I've obviously worked with her for years. She calls me if there's an injured cat on the street, things like that, and I do medical for those guys. And we talked extensively yesterday because I know she was the one that was the original person to propose the ban to the council. And she expressed, and she was going to reach out to you guys. I don't know if that happened today through email, but she expressed that she absolutely supports the TNR solution. And so I thought that had a lot of weight because that was one of our Metro officers in this town who's on the front lines of this thing every day, the overpopulation, and she did express support for us. So.
Any questions from council or comments? Jamie, I actually have a question for you. So you talk about working with Metro and relocating them to other communities. And so I backtracked to when I was up at Metro and the exact same thing was taking place. How difficult is it today for you to find places for these cats to go?
Well, so I just got the notice on Saturday. So just last Saturday that the shelter was full, and they, you know, I think they've got one kennel space open. And this week, so after tomorrow's transport and after Thursday's transport, they'll have 35 cats that I will have been able to find no kill for. And every year, so that's just this week of my transports, because I do span all over, as far as all over the state of Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. So as of every year, I would say we do at least 200 cats leave the shelter on my transports.
Okay, and I guess more specifically, my question is that the locations that they're taken to, are those difficult to find? And the reason I ask that is because while I was in there, we did have somebody, and I won't mention who the person was, but it was a person that is in the same situation as you are, that would go to Metro and would take animals, and then they were relocating the animals. However, we ultimately ended up going to a house here in town that had over 300 of them that they never relocated because they could not find a place to take them. And so then we had another problem. Obviously, all the cats that we had thought had gone elsewhere, we ended up getting them all back. So that's why I ask how difficult it is to...
I know exactly what you're referring to, and I was one of the vet techs that did all of the medical with the doctor on all of those cats.
Okay.
Metro, so I know exactly the situation that you're referring to. Some of the shelters that we take to, one of them is, like I said, the largest cat rescue in the state of Wyoming. They're very well known. They are Second Chance. And they're located in Sheridan. Another one is Laws, Laramie Animal Welfare Society. We have Colorado ones, NOCO, Colorado Kitty Coalition. These are all legit rescues and shelters that are top-notch. Ones with veterinarians on their staff. So when the animals that I transport out of our shelter go in there, they're spayed, neutered. If they have injuries, illness, anything like that, they are taken care of in-house. So like I said, top of the line rescues that we work with and that we get these guys to. They're not going into somebody's house or, you know, situations like that. My organization here in Casper, we are foster-based. So we're a foster-based program. The majority of my foster homes take in like Metro's orphan kittens that need to be bottle fed around the clock, you know, that sort of thing. And the majority of them, the most that they have is about a litter of kittens. So they're not all in a central location, whereas the past one that you were referring to was she was centrally locating all of the kitties, so.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mayor Friel, members of the council, my name is Justin Benfit. I'm with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. I've addressed you guys a couple times before on this issue, so I'll keep my comments brief. But the gentleman that first spoke about potential communicable diseases kind of prompted something that I thought I should bring up to you all, and that is, you know, my past comments have regarded the concerns that we have with any time we artificially concentrate wildlife. We can exacerbate and spread disease, whether it be chronic wasting disease, cholera, things like that in birds. I guess one of the things that I would like to have you folks consider as well is when we concentrate things like feral cats, we can also provide a reservoir for diseases such as distemper. Parvovirus can also occur when we concentrate dogs. And just in the last 2 years, the department has dealt with numerous cases with with distemper in raccoons, and I believe Metro has as well, and that those are definitively linked to feeding feral cats. But is what I am suggesting is that is another potential reservoir source for a disease like that. So I guess I would like to again reiterate my agency's concern with impacts to wildlife, native wildlife populations with respect to feral cats. That's all I have.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Huber.
I have one question. Sir, I presume that you have some background in animal husbandry and that kind of thing. Is that correct?
I would say that would be fairly minimal.
Okay, well.
I own pets.
Yeah, well, And what I was going to ask is, my understanding is that as a general proposition, well-nourished animals of any species reproduce at a higher rate than malnourished animals. To your knowledge and understanding, am I correct or am I wrong?
Yeah, Councilman Huber, absolutely. I mean, that's well demonstrated in research with things like mule deer, elk, ungulates. Yeah, you bet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Lana Cotter. I was not intending to speak today, so this isn't really my forte. My experience with feral cats specifically is I lived in Los Angeles for 15 years, and I did rescue while I was there, mostly dogs, and then there was a big TNR community there. And it was so accessible to everybody, all the volunteers, minimal out-of-pocket expenses. We had funding through a 501c3 called Fix Nation. And if they're not the preeminent TNR organization in the States, and they must be second or third, they fix hundreds of animals a week and humanely euthanize the animals that are trapped, that can't be saved. And I guess I wonder why a huge city like Los Angeles, you know, who doesn't have money, is able to take the problem on through a series of networks and connections and volunteers and work together to spay and neuter these animals or humanely euthanize them. I've lived in Casper again for 4 years, and I recently met some of the girls from the Alliance. And so volunteers have a way of finding each other, and especially animal lovers. So I really feel like I found my people here, but that so many people, especially kids, need to be educated about animals and pets and things like that. This is not an animal problem. This is a person problem. And, you know, feral cats don't live long. They live on the average about 2 to 3 years, whether they're attacked by an animal or hit by a car or diseased. But through feeding colonies and colony management, which we were able to do in LA, and, you know, slowly the numbers dwindle because they're not having other animals, but we were able to just get our numbers down. I don't have statistics or numbers for you today, I apologize, but you know, I lived in a huge area that was able to prevent so many animals from having other animals. And I just feel like with efforts combined, it would be such a proud place to live in Casper, Wyoming. I mean, I lived in a pretty progressive city. We shut down pet stores from selling bred dogs or that came from puppy breeders, puppy mills. While I lived in Los Angeles, those no longer exist there. It just made me really proud to live there. I mean, big cities get a bad rap for being cold and whatever, but I feel like Casper could really lead by example here. I mean, Jackson has a very low kill rate. They do programs like transporting pets on planes from other states around the country that have a high kill rate, and they bring them to Jackson to get adopted. I don't see any reason in a town of 50,000 some people we couldn't do the same thing. And I know sometimes it comes down to money and funding, but I really feel like with people working together and finding veterinarians that take ferals, I see it as accessible and really doable.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to council on this? Okay, we'll move on to discussion with council. Councilman Bates.
I just want to say thank you for everybody that came out and spoke regarding this and seeing your passion and being a voice for the animals. And my comment earlier regarding how much more would it mean if you had the money is, obviously several of you definitely prove that you have put the money into it, and I thank you for mentioning that, because that is a big consideration there, and thank you for doing so and taking care of the animals around Casper and Natrona. So I just want to just say thank you, yeah, all of you, really appreciate it.
Councilman Kathy.
Well, first of all, I think if they look at the ordinance and even some of the amendments, we have not ruled out a TNR program. If the volunteers are willing to do that, then organize and go do that, as the young lady back here in the back did in 2012. We have no problem, no issue with that. By the same token, to me, and it's a bit of semantics, but feeding and trapping are two different things. You put bait in a trap to get an animal to come in. You aren't throwing a bowl of food out to feed 20 cats. And so to me, those are two different things, and I don't think they are mutually exclusive to each other. But we have had, and I guess I would go back as well and say that if you people are really trying, and I'm talking about now, citizen and community-wide, if you're really interested in what is going on here, the agendas for the work sessions and the agendas for council meetings come out every Friday. And because you didn't hear about this till second reading, somebody was remiss then in even looking at some of these things. Because second reading was 2 weeks after the first, and there was at least a work session a week before that was put on a work session agenda. So you're looking 3 weeks just in that time frame. So I wish people would become more involved with these things and not always wait till the last minute. And that's, yeah, anyhow. That's kind of where I am, and like I said, I don't feel that the feeding ban and trapping are mutually exclusive. I think you can go ahead and trap the animals and not be classified as feeding. And that's what you do with raccoons, with your rabbits, with anything else. And that is not considered feeding by Fish and Game. That is trapping. Is that a reasonable assessment? If I want to go out and trap a raccoon to get them out of my property, is that considered feeding a raccoon or feeding a wild animal?
Well, the Wyoming Game Fish Commission has no regulation against feeding, so it wouldn't fall within our purview either way, but to maybe hopefully answer your question, we do loan out our traps free of charge to help folks take care of those problems themselves, which obviously you have to bait the trap.
And you said it, you hit the nail on the head. You bait the trap. You aren't actually feeding the raccoon or the animal you're trying to trap. Okay. That was the point I was wanting to try to make, is that they are not mutually exclusive, and in the ordinance, you can go ahead and set up your TNR program. But in the meantime, we need to stop feeding the animals. And the other thing, as you mentioned as well, and I said it before, is we do have to worry about the collateral damage of these communities with the neighbors. And I have gotten several phone calls about people that get rid of the cats. They are destroying my flowers. They are defecating all over my flower beds. I know one lady that actually has quit even trying to plant flowers because the cats keep tearing them up. And she has gone out and actually put forks in her flower bed to keep the cats out so she doesn't have the stench and the stink of the defecation of the animals in her yard. So those are the people I'm talking about when I say I have to look out for people as well. And that's one of the things, and I've even got 2 phone calls from people wanting us to quit feeding birds because they are drawing in not the little sparrows, but the Asian doves that are making a mess of the neighborhoods. Now, I'm not advocating that, don't get me wrong, but that's the other side of the issue as well, is the collateral damage that comes from feeding animals. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple thoughts. One, thank you for coming out. I've been on council for about 8 years, and almost 8 years coming up. And so I've seen a lot of controversial issues. We've talked a lot of things. I've had groups where it's split in the middle, where you see a big group coming in on one side and then another big group on the other side. I haven't seen an outcry of people saying in support of this ordinance. I have not seen that. What I've seen is quite contrary to that, of you guys coming out and being able to come and have a conversation with us to say, look, we've seen this in other communities. It doesn't work. Give us some time to do that. I tend to strike a middle ground on most things, and so I tend to be that way. And so I've kind of gone back and forth. I'd look over at Councilman Huber, and I'd say, I don't know where I stand, and so forth. And so for this issue, for me, I want to give it an opportunity to work with you guys to be able to see if we can make this work. So I'm not going to be supporting the ban on the feeding the feral cats. And the reason I'm not going to support it is having a conversation with some other people in the community who have just come to me and said, you know, it's to criminalize feeding animals, kind of what Councilman Johnson has said. This doesn't make sense. I think there's other alternatives like TNR and other ways that we can do that and be able to work with the community. It's terrible. I didn't even know Jamie was doing that in the community with cats. And now that I know that, I wish I would have known that. That way we could have had more of a conversation to go out and to do those types of things and have those conversations to work with the community. As far as tethering the dogs, again, I have concerns with no time limit on it. I know some amendments are coming up, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to support some amendments that are going to be happening in regards to that. If it's something that's not going to, I probably will vote against the whole ordinance just because of that. That's just kind of where I'm standing right now, and I felt the outcry of that from you guys. I hear your voice. And then I also want to echo what Councilman Powell said about people complaining about we had all these emails. There are other communities that have dealt with these types of things. That's why they're reaching out. That's part of our process. I don't care if we got 50,000 emails from people. We're public servants. Our emails are open. So we signed up for that when we got elected, that we were going to hear the voice of the people. So I'm not going to sit and cry about it. It was a little annoying to have to go through and delete those. But guess what? It doesn't take that much to delete a few emails. So I'd rather hear people's voices than complain about having 200, 300 emails. Thank you.
Councilman Johnson.
So I just want to say that my opposition to the ordinance initially isn't because I don't recognize that feral cats are an issue and that they might cause harm to somebody or be a nuisance to some people. I just find it just ridiculous that you would make feeding a cat a crime. I mean, I would argue that we didn't do our due diligence either. We immediately jumped to making a criminal ordinance on feeding cats rather than finding out if there's any other citizen groups out there that would be interested in helping us with this. And that seems to be the reaction of government in America in general, from the national level all the way down, is how can we stop this? Well, let's make a criminal law about it. And I just reject that notion that making a criminal law for everything is the answer, because it's not. There's always an alternative.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support making it a crime to feed wild animals, turkeys, deer, whatever wild animals live within our community. As our friend from the Game and Fish has pointed out, this is just an inappropriate practice and it spreads disease. Councilman Bates in a few minutes is going to offer an amendment about exempting cats and dogs from the ordinance. And I have wrestled with this, as Councilman Pacheco has. I think I would be willing to consider that if there was a metric in place to say, at the end of a year, how did that affect the euthanization rates and the trapping rates that our Metro staff was forced to go through. Did it really reduce the population? And if it didn't, then a feeding ban should be in place, clearly. So I think these are all difficult decisions. I know some of my comments sound like I'm opposed to TNR. I'm just aware of the fact that these are controversial matters, and there's a wide range of opinions about what will work best. So I think we'll have a robust discussion about that amendment when it comes up. I support, again, a ban on feeding wild animals, and the question is a stray cat and dog truly a wild animal? And I understand, and a very impressive work, by the way, that many of you are doing for these animals, and it's obviously gone unrecognized. So, and with regard to the tethering, another tough issue, I think there is a way to put some time limits in place, and I will support that amendment when it comes forward, as I did before. But I also, again, if we had a way to ask a dog, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to be on a rope with shelter, water, and food outside? Or would you rather be in a cage in the kitchen? I bet most dogs would say, I'd rather be outside on that rope than in a cage in the kitchen. And I think it's really sad when animals are in those conditions. So anyway, let's get to those amendments when it's time. But I think I'm very I know I'm very supportive of what our animal control people are doing, and this entire ordinance is before us because of their experiences. So thank you.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just take an opportunity to address part of Councilman Johnson's concern here. I don't like the idea that, okay, there's a problem, let's run out and make it against the law and criminalize people. I don't like that idea any more than anyone else does. But there is a simple fact of the matter that if you're going to live in a community and coexist around other people, there have to be community standards. And there are people who just simply don't get it. There are people who, no matter how many times you go and you talk to them and you try to jawbone them and cajole them and everything else and say, gee, Manise, look at how what you are doing is negatively impacting everybody around you. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. There are some people who just don't get it. And that is why, as a bottom line, we have to have ordinances, rules, laws that have teeth in them, so that when there is that person who just doesn't get it, that we can sit there and say, well, okay, here's the standard. Now you're going to have to, if you want to live in this community, you've got to live up to this community standard. That's why we need to do that. And I would just ask that everybody keep that in mind. I don't think our police officers, metro people, or anybody else, I don't think they go out just searching for somebody. Oh boy, here's someone that's the first time there's been a complaint. I gotcha. If I thought for a minute that any of our agents, any of our city employees were doing that, boy, I'd be the first one that'd be down on them real quick. I think that they would much more likely be out there trying to say, geez, guys, you know, let's try to figure something out here and work with this. But anyway, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of think we're looking at kind of a straw man, because everybody's trying to say we're going to criminalize this. Well, I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room is aware that when you roll through a stop sign, and we criminalize that. If some officer decides to give you a ticket for rolling through a stop sign, we've made a criminal out of you. We also have a lot of people that park downtown longer than they should. So are we criminalizing that? I just think that's just a stretch to say we're going to make a criminal out of grandma because she feeds her stray cats. I just think the whole thing's a bit of a stretch.
All right, I think that's just about it on the discussion. The only thing that I would say is that listening to everybody that's come up here tonight, and a lot of things have been said, it seems that we have people that are spending their own money to do TNR. We have 501c3s that are in place that have been doing this and helping Metro and relocating animals. It seems that we have groups that are behind the whole TNR process. So I would simply say that the people are in place in this audience here tonight. I think you just need to absolutely get together. If you want to get a TNR program together, you should talk to one another out there and make it happen. It seems like you've got everything in place. You just don't have it in place. So, anything further on discussion before we move to amendments? All right. So we'll move to amendments. Vice Mayor Lutz.
That way. All right, so the more and more I thought about this and discussed it with other individuals, when we're talking about the feeding ban, I think it's very unfair to just say, I straight up don't oppose the feeding ban, I have no other solutions, I'm just telling you I don't support it. And I understand that it ties into TNR, but TNR aside, simply talking about the feeding ban, I think it's very unfair to just come to the table and say, I don't support it, but I'm also not gonna offer you any other solutions because that's just my feelings on it. So I did some research, talked around, and I think part of the discussion that we were missing with the feeding ban is accountability. When you take home a pet from Metro, Humane Society, wherever it may be, and you start feeding it and you vaccinate it, it is now your responsibility because you're taking care of that as a pet. You're calling yourself its owner. And so what I would propose, and I've just passed this out because this is kind of going to be complicated, so I'll read through the technical, but on the surface of it, what I'm proposing is that we remove the feeding ban of feral cats and dogs, leave the feeding ban on the wild animals, and add a paragraph that I'll just read it to you. Says, a keeper is any person or organization harboring, regularly feeding, or having in his or its possession any feral cat or dog, or who permits a feral cat or feral dog to habitually be or remain on or be lodged or fed within such person's property or premises. A keeper of a feral cat or feral dog shall be deemed the animal's owner and shall be responsible for the health care of such animals and liable for the damage created by such animals. The reason I came to this amendment was we've talked about the fact of, there is a secondary accountability portion to feral cats. It's not fair that when my son broke his back and was immunocompromised, I literally had to go through my yard before he played in it to make sure there wasn't feral animal feces and that he was more likely at the time to contract disease. Those cats shouldn't be in my yard. They're not my cats. And so I think this brings in the piece of, if people want to facilitate and feed and basically, take ownership for these feral cats, that's fine, but there are responsibilities that come to being the owner of such animal. So you guys can obviously see the things that I've wrote, but for clarity purposes, what I am amending is on line 3, paragraph C, number 1, removing the words that say, but including feral cats, feral dogs, and turkeys. Is that correct, John? Okay, and say, or feral cats maintained by a keeper. And then line 4, I would remove the wording that says, where such animals are not deemed or claimed to be property of the person or the caretaker thereof. And then I would propose to add section C, paragraph 2 that I previously read, defining what a keeper is, defined as. That's duplicate, but.
Okay, so to sum it up, the amendment that's on the table is basically, just, if you're going to take the responsibility, if you're going to feed and take the responsibility of a feral cat or dog, you're taking on the responsibility of the feral cat or dog. So you will become their owner, you will become responsible for and liable for that animal. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Pacheco. Any discussion? Councilman Johnson.
I have a question. Isn't there a limit on the amount of animals one can have in the city limits?
There is. I believe it's.
So if someone took on a colony of feral cats, they'd be in violation of that with this amendment, would they not? So we would have to amend that portion of the ordinance in order for this amendment to work?
Mr. City Attorney?
I wouldn't think so. Basically, you have 2 cats and 3 dogs. Just depends, I guess, how big you want to have your colony, how big the council would want to have a colony. So it's for people that want to do this on their own or maintain a man or a woman who wants to just feed 2 or 3 cats or dogs, they can do that. If it's a TNR group, then obviously they're going to be doing that and then returning them to some neighborhood or something that not being for adoption.
I get, well, this amendment says that if a person regularly feeds or have in their possession any feral cat or dog, then they shall become the animal's owner. And so if somebody decided they wanted to feed a group of 5 cats regularly, then they become the owner of those 5 cats, which would be in violation of the city ordinance on the amount of animals that you can own. Right.
I think that would be correct, yes.
Okay, so then in order for this amendment to work, then we would have to amend the ordinance to lift the limits on the amount of animals that somebody can own in the city.
Or you limit the amount of animals.
Right.
I guess that as the amendment proposer, I guess that would be my comment, was that I think we would need to make the decision then, is it appropriate for one household to be facilitating / taking care of? I mean, what are we comfortable with? If every house in a neighborhood has 20 cats that it's taking care of, I think, that brings up the other discussion of where is that comfort level if every home was to be partaking in feeding feral animals.
Councilman Huber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I read this, the language in this proposed amendment, where it says that they shall become the owner, then I think that they would indeed be subject to the limitations of 3 dogs, 3 cats, or whatever. Actually, I kind of like this amendment that you're proposing. The only thing that I would suggest as a friendly addition to this would be shall be deemed the animal's owner and shall in all respects comply with other applicable city ordinances, other applicable provisions regarding ownership of such an animal, and make that clear to people. I don't know if that would be a helpful addition to this or not, and if you don't want to accept my friendly offer there, that's okay too.
And I just had the only concern I had was that this would be like a conflict if we didn't add language like that into the amendment. That's all. I'm not saying I'm against it, but we do have a limit on the amount of animals someone can have in the city, so then this should reflect, fall in line with that, or we'd have to change that number.
Mr. Mayor, I just thought of some more word economical wording for what I just suggested. If you made that read, a keeper of a feral cat or feral dog shall be deemed the animal's owner for all purposes, and then go on with your language, and shall be responsible for the health care, blah, blah, blah. There, I think if you added in those 3 words, for all purposes.
Can I get the
Vice
city
Mayor?
attorney's advice if that wording would cover what we're referencing?
It would seem to clarify that if there was a question about that. So I wouldn't think there would be any difficulty in doing that.
Councilman Kathy?
Along those same lines, if they are the owner of that animal, don't our regulations also state that then they're supposed to have a collar, they're supposed to have rabies vaccinations and that tag attached, and on every year?
That's included in here. It says that you would be responsible for their health care.
I just want people to understand what that entails is that they have to have this animal every year taken to a vet, revaccinated, everything else. Otherwise, and what you're doing is you're turning then a feral cat, which by definition is a wild cat, into a domesticated animal. But yet we have been told that you can't domesticate feral cats.
I'm not advocating for them to be brought into homes or anything of that nature. I'm advocating for responsibility and accountability for the individuals that are pseudo-owning them.
Councilman Bates.
Here, I don't want you, I'm not against it. The only concerns that I have regarding it is it's limiting how many cats or how many dogs they can feed. So if a person already has 2 dogs, then they can only have however many more animals. So a colony sounds like more than just 3 cats or 3 dogs. The other problem, or I guess issue I have, and anybody can answer these, is I guess how would you enforce this one? Everybody talks about enforcing. You're taking care of animals outside your home, and you say, no, I only take care of these 3 cats, but 8 other cats are eating from the same dish. So I don't understand how that would solve any of those issues, I guess.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
And so, I mean, I guess where I would just say is if we're concerned that 3 and 3 isn't enough, where is the limit? Because I can tell you guys right now, as a resident and a homeowner, I'm not comfortable with somebody in my neighborhood having like 25 cats that they're feeding and that are coming into my garage and that are attacking my pets and going on my lawn and things of that nature. So I guess my point is, if you think 3 is too little, I worry as to what we think is an acceptable number, and if the average citizen would be comfortable having whatever a colony is. I mean, I don't know what a colony typically is, 25, 50, I don't know. I don't deal with rescue. And as far as, I mean, we've been told time and time again that the way that they take care of these feral cats is you follow them to where they're being fed, because we've been told that they will stay where they're being fed. They won't go and roam about. They stay where they're being fed. And so I think that that is what helps track that back.
Any other discussion on this? I think it's a terrible idea to even to breach the idea of changing the numbers that are allowed right now. And we're talking about redoing a whole nother ordinance then, as far as how many animals we're allowing within the city. I guess in looking at what you're saying is, if we truly are doing a TNR and you want to move feral cats, if we want to put them in that program, then if it does stay, if this were to move forward, you'd be limited to the amount that you could have, but you put them in the process and get them to people that relocate them and get them relocated to where they need to go. It just limits you in the amount of animals that you can actually do that with. Councilman Johnson.
One more question. So, would an organization, like if these folks here were to set up an organization for cat rescue or relocation or whatever, are they limited in the amount of animals that they can have? Is that mentioned in our ordinance at all, or is it just targeted more towards like private?
Mr. City Attorney, that's kind of the same question I had, is how can they have the amount of animals that, or I guess what is the limitation on the amount of animals for these groups?
The ordinance actually provides 3 cats or 3 dogs on any premises within the city limits of Casper. So that would, I think, apply to a TNR organization as well as to a smaller mom and pop type of TNR organization. So with respect to them keeping them, and it does make reference to keeping more than 3 cats and 3 dogs. I mean, if you intend to keep them, then I think that you're probably going to be held in violation of the ordinance if anyone wants to prosecute you for that or turn you in, and you have someone who wants to write the citation for it. But if you're not keeping them, if they're just kind of in transit, it seems to me that you're probably going to be okay. And particularly if you have your 501c3 established, and that's what your business plan is, and you can show that to the judge or to the officer and say, I'm not keeping these, I'm just taking care of them for a period of time till they can be relocated.
Councilman Johnson.
Well, maybe down the road, once things get set up, we can take another look at that.
Councilman Cathy.
I think what Councilman Johnson was asking about, and Mr. Henley alluded to, is that if you are the 503C, you become like the Humane Society there on McKinley, and you can have more than the 2 or 3 because you are taking them in. You are in business of, it's a business, it's not a private ownership, so to speak. And that's how, heck, used to have pet stores in the mall that had more than 3. So it becomes a business, nonprofit, but it is a business that I think winds up being exempt. This is primarily referring to the private individual and not a business. Is that kind of how you are interpreting that, Mr. Henley?
Yes, sir. In fact, the ordinance does talk about an exception for kennels or catteries.
Just wanted to make sure that we're not limiting those types of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilman Hopkins.
Yeah, we keep talking about 501c3, and I don't think that's really what they want to be. If it was a 501c3, they can't talk politics. You can't lobby if you're a C3. So I think there's another designation so it's not a 501c3, I don't believe.
Then what is Alley Cat's allies?
Well, they're written letters, but they're pushing the envelope, I think.
Any other discussion? Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, before we vote on this, I'm just wondering, Vice Mayor Lutz, have you accepted my 3 additional words there, and has your seconder accepted that? I just want to know what we're voting on.
Yes, I intended to, sorry, if I wasn't clear about that, let me be clear. To accept for all purposes after deemed the animal's owner.
Do you accept that? Well, you were the second, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I second, yeah.
Okay. Yes. So first and second both agree upon it. Any other discussion? Okay, so we'll move on to any abstention or nay votes on this amended ordinance. Okay, all voting aye.
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 Okay.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Okay, are there any further amendments that would not have been covered under that one? Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me double check this, because I had amendment that was similar, but that would delete that. But, in your packet, amendment number 3, amendment of 6.04240, trapping restriction for dogs and cats. On B, I'd like to change the language. The current language, if I remember, I don't have the current one, but it would say animal capture must be turned over to MAS, Metro, Animal Service, as soon as reasonably possible, or may be returned to the owner if known. Feral cats and feral dogs captured may be provided to a TNR organization approved by MAS for neutering or may be turned over to MAS or the Humane Society. What that is, just the current one was just saying all animals captured had to be turned over to Metro. This is offering the chance of it for a TNR organization to be able to capture the cat or dog, do what it needs to be, and could either be turned over to Humane, to Metro, or released back into its natural environment.
All right, so I think I'm following you. So instead of just, the amendment is to not just turn it over to Metro, but to allow it to be turned over to another shelter.
For TNR organization to be able to trap it, if they want to vaccine, neuter it, all that stuff, and then release it. They don't have to turn it over to Metro, but they can, or Humane Society.
Okay, so that amendment on there, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Johnson. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bates, could you just read through that language one more time? That's a little bit different than the printed version that I have in front of me.
So in B, it says, animals captured must be turned over to MAS as soon as reasonable possible, or may be returned to the owner if known. Feral cats and feral dogs captured may be provided to a TNR organization approved by MAS for nurturing, or may be turned over to MAS or the Humane Society.
I wonder if you might, to accomplish your purpose, if you'd need the language on there, and release, for neutering and release.
TNR is trap, neuter, and release. So
Well,
the words TNR.
But you specifically say.
I know, but if that's not defined somewhere in the ordinances, what I'm getting at.
And I'm not opposed to it.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, just to make sure everybody is exceptionally clear here, the only new language that's being proposed is what's in red or underlined. So while we read the whole paragraph, the new part is just the red and the underline.
So red in the underline says feral cats and feral dogs captured may be provided to a TNR organization approved by MAS for neutering, or may be turned over to MAS or the Humane Society. That's what's being changed. Vice Mayor Lutz.
Silly question, John, but does it need to say neutering / spaying, or is it okay to just reference neutering? I know that's silly. I just, for clarity purposes.
I think neutering's accepted kind of in the communities. Thank you.
And I guess also, John, to the question that was asked, should and release be put in there then?
Actually, I think it's, the R stands for return in most jurisdictions, so it would be trap, neutering, and return. The organization still has to be approved by MAS, so you know, they would be able to monitor that. If you want that to feel more comfortable, that would be fine. I mean, it doesn't make any difference, I don't think. I would think this might be sufficient, but to put it in, if you feel more comfortable, that's wonderful.
Okay, do you guys want that in there or not? Okay, I think we're good the way it is. Is there any further discussion on this one? Okay, so any abstention or nay votes on this one? All voting aye on this amendment?
Aye.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
All right.
Okay, so I withdraw, I don't know if I'm supposed to, but withdraw amendment number 4. So to move to amendment number 5, 6.04210 neglect, in section, or in number 6, in the red, it says both water and food and water shall be provided in a non-spill containers for tethering animals. Then number 7, this is my main proposal, is, so just to refresh the history, we did have a 2-hour tethering. Then in second reading, we changed it to 24-hour tethering. So my amendment is to change that to, if the animal owner has a fence yard which will contain the owner's animal, the animal may only be tethered for 2 hours in a 24-hour period. If the owner does not have a fence yard which will contain the owner's animal, the animal may be tethered no more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. So to explain again, is if you have a fenced-in yard, then there's no reason to tether unless you're having a barbecue and you don't want little spot jumping all over your company. You don't want to lock them in the house. You could tether them for no more than 2 hours. So those who have fences, it offers it to them if they choose to take that. If you do not have a fence, then you can tether them for up to 10 hours in a 24-hour period. A lot of people ask, how will you enforce this? And as I mentioned in the work session, that if council or if Metro chooses to bring it up, or the police department, whoever, that what I've gathered information is, if we purchased or invested in trail cameras for Metro, and some neighbor has a complaint about the dog has been out there for longer than 10 hours, because the food and water is already covered in another section. But the dog's been out there for more than every day for longer than 10 hours, out there for 24. Metro can, if an owner says, I have a problem with this, I would be okay for you to set up a trail camera to put on that person's yard that cannot be put in their windows or facing their windows, but facing the dog. And the Metro could set up the camera, leave, come back 24 hours, pull their personal camera, look over the pictures or look over the video, and if they find that, yes, they're in violation, then they can, try to rectify it correctly. So that possibly could be enforced.
Kind of a point of order here. Is this speaking to the amendment, or are we talking about a different issue, buying trail cameras?
He has a point.
Okay, all right. Mr. Manager.
Sorry.
No, good call.
Could I make a
Mr.
point of order too? There hasn't been a second to this motion yet. Was there a second to it?
No, there has not been.
I'll second the amendment.
Now there has. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, pursuant to the amendment that's being delivered by the first and second, my recommendation would be that we would add the previous 2 cruelty provisions into the same amendment, in that it alters the same ordinance if it pleases the council. And specifically, I'm talking about items number 4 and 5 that were originally proposed by Vice Mayor Lutz some time ago. And I think for purposes of expediency and convenience, if it's okay with the petitioner, adding those 2 to the topic, I would say would be advisable.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. So we have an amendment on the floor by Councilman Bates that, we just added to that too, but, non-spill containers for tethered animals, and then 2 hours in a 24-hour period if you have a fenced yard, 10 hours if you don't have a fenced yard. And what else am I missing on that?
Mr. Mayor, items 4 and 5 also that deal with the type of collar as well as entanglements.
Okay. So we have a first and a second on that. Any discussion? Okay.
Excuse me. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman
I
Huber.
want to make sure that, Councilman Bates has accepted the city manager's suggestion to add those things to your motion to amend? Okay, and your
And
second
so did the
has.
second.
I just, I would like to also suggest that we add another item, 8, I guess it would be, that would say, no, in any event, okay, here, Councilman, or Vice Mayor Lutz, in any event, no animal shall be tethered in a manner or for a length of time that would constitute cruelty or abuse of the animal. 'Cause I would like to see that overarching language in any tethering thing that we do.
I'm fine with that.
You're good with that?
I'm fine.
Second's good with that? Okay, so.
Are we trying to make everybody happy tonight? Even me?
We're trying.
Real hard.
Could you read that again, Councilman Hughes?
You could just hand that down to him. John, you've had experience reading my handwriting before, so.
Thanks. It's pretty good.
Vote on it.
Mr. Mayor? I'm just going to point out, I will be voting for this because if we don't pass this, tethering will be allowed 24/7.
Okay.
Steve,
Vice Mayor Lutz.
just really quick, with the addition of Mike Huber's amendment, just to make it clear to all those listening and all of us who are getting a little twisty-turvy, what Mike Huber's additional, wording to the amendment states is that if at any point an animal officer deems the manner in which the animal is tethered as cruel, it basically supersedes any of the previous items that it's stating. And so for those who are saying, that tethering is just cruel in all forms, if it appears as cruel to the animal officer, they have the right to call it done right then and there.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make one further comment with reference to the, how do we prove the length of time that this has been done. In this day and age, any complaining neighbor, passerby, or anything can take a picture with their cellular phone, have it imprint the date and time on it, come back an hour later, 2 hours later, 5 hours later, 20 hours later, and then they'll have a date and time imprinted on that picture. That's an easy thing to prove in this day and age. Years ago, it would have been hard to prove. Not anymore.
And I'll take that a step further. I don't advocate that we buy trail cams or anything like that for Metro and loan them out to people. People can do that on their own. So, Mr. Attorney, could I possibly have you read back this amended so that we get it clear on the record as to what all of this entails?
Very good. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Initially, we have an amendment, and if you will look at Councilman Bates' amendment number 5, which was part of the packet, it would be all of that, which would include paragraphs 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then we have Councilman Huber's provision, which he hand wrote, and which provides in any event, no animal shall be tethered in a manner or for a length of time that would constitute cruelty to or
Abuse of.
abuse of the animal.
And that would be paragraph 8.
That's true, paragraph 8. And that would constitute the changes. So they're all written out with the exception of paragraph 8.
Okay, Councilman Cassidy.
I believe that according to what Mr. Napier mentioned, items 8 and 9 would actually be items 4 and 5 from what was shown as Amendment 1. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
So Councilman Huber's amendment would actually be number 10.
No, I don't think that is correct. Councilman Bates had his last two highlighted, but the two prior ones were actually part of Councilwoman Lutz's original number 1. And so we thought that it was going to go Councilwoman Lutz's amendment first, and she would get 4 and 5 in, and then we would go with Councilman Bates's. Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we will vote on this amendment, so any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye. With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Do we have any other amendments? Councilman Cathy.
I believe we still have, if I'm not correct, what was listed as Amendment 2 in our packet, which deals with the police canine exclusion exemptions. And if I could get Mr. Henley to put in there, because I'm having trouble following parts of the way it's highlighted on mine, but it looks like he is are excluded from, and it was sections 6.04.010, subparagraph 2, and then 6.040108, and 6.0401, is that 34?
Mm-hmm.
And then down under 19, where it says snarling, nipping, and baring teeth.
Okay, was there also a section in there, section J in 60430 that needed to be stricken?
In fact, that is true, and J and 6.0430, that's true. 604-300, it's basically just reserved, so there's nothing there under the current numbering system. And the provision for J is also non-existent. So it's just a technical numbering type of correction in that regard.
Okay, so the amendment on the table by Councilman Cathy is what was just read off. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Any discussion? All right, any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye. With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Thank you all.
Do we have any more amendments, or is that it? Okay. So now we go back to the amended ordinance, or the ordinance as amended. Any further discussion on it? Councilman Johnson.
Just a question. The ordinance as amended, does it criminalize feeding cats?
No.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Councilman Pacheco.
Now. I'll go with my gun. Go ahead. Go.
Mr. Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cathy.
Since Vice Mayor Lutz mentioned that it did no longer criminalize the feeding of cats, where was that removed?
In my original, the very first amendment that I did. So, sorry, the papers that I handed out?
It shall be unlawful for any person.
Yep, so it previously said it should be unlawful for any person to provide shelter, feed, blah, 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 together or frequent with the exception of birds, squirrels, but right there we had originally said, but including feral cats, feral dogs, and I striked that line. So now it's only referencing the feeding of wild animals.
By definition, a feral cat is a wild animal.
Then the ordinance definition?
I'll say, is that the ordinance definition, because I was gonna, I mean, by removing it,
According to Merriam-Webster and the Oxford Dictionary, a feral cat is a wild animal.
what matters is how it's defined in the ordinance.
I don't think we need to be redefining
That's how.
accepted terms.
Okay, point of order. What is the do we have the definition in the ordinance itself as to what a feral? Because that's where it matters. It doesn't matter what Webster says, it matters what the ordinance says and what that definition is by law.
We have,
Mr. City Attorney?
thank you, Mayor, Council. The definition of feral cat is at paragraph 25. It provides feral cat means the cat that lives outdoors and has little or no human contact other than feeding. And no person claiming any aspect of ownership can be reasonably located. It does not allow itself to be handled or touched by humans and will run away if able. It typically remains hidden from humans, although some feral cats become more comfortable with people who regularly feed them. Even with long attempts at socialization, feral cats usually remain fearful and avoidant of humans. So that would be the definition of feral cat. The definition of cat, I think, cat is a member of a feline family that shall not include feral cats, exotic wild cats, and wild species of this family or hybrids thereof. So I think that Councilwoman Lutz's amendment addressed feral cats and not just regular cats.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, I think that if you look at item number 59 under the definition section, we do have a definition of wild animal or exotic pet. And so regardless of what, with all due respect to Merriam-Webster and every other dictionary in the world, we have legislated in this ordinance, we will have legislated a definition of wild animal.
Mr. City Manager?
So, Mr. Mayor, I just want to be exceptionally clear here. It was my impression that the intention of that, the First Amendment that was offered this evening was to not criminalize the feeding of feral cats and feral dogs.
That was the intention.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might just expand on that a little bit, mostly so that everybody who might be out there in the listening public understands the effect of that amendment is basically to make anyone who does feed what would otherwise have been considered stray dogs or cats, in essence, to make them the owner and responsible in all respects as an owner. And so if they fail in any of those responsibilities, then potentially there might be some criminal liability, just as it would be with any other pet owner.
Exactly.
Okay, any further discussion? Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to back up and point out that, is my understanding that the feeding ban was proposed to us by our own animal control specialists. And while we have not heard directly from them, Chief McFeeters has represented them. And if I remember correctly, he told us that they trapped 1,500 cats and euthanized 500 of them within the span of a year. And the people who work for Metro are animal lovers themselves, and I can only imagine what it must be like for them to have to euthanize 500 cats. It's horrible. And I'm sure that it's a very difficult thing for them to do. And so we need to at some point evaluate what we've done here to see if in fact it has helped to solve that problem. And so I will not be here, but I hope that this group will see if in fact a functional TNR program is actually created and working. And if those numbers go down, and if they don't, well, maybe a feeding ban is needed. But I believe that I don't want to call it a threat, but that consequence really should be still out there for the people who want to see us listen to them and not go through with this. So I hope that we will revisit this at some point and say, did it work? Because, and I surely hope that it does. So I'll be voting for the ordinance as amended, but we'll see if this actually solves anything.
I think I'll just add to what you were just saying that we have not heard from the officer that brought it forward. We did hear tonight from a person in the audience that had supposedly talked to her today and said that she's retracted what she said. So, but again, we can't confirm if that's happened or not because we have not talked to her. So, but if she in fact has retracted it, then that changes things too. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cathy.
Yes. Basically, I was going to vote for this because I felt that the feeding ban was still in place. Looks like I was hoodwinked by the wording and the thoughts of amendment number 1, and so I will now be voting against this whole amendment.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, so on the ordinance as amended, any abstention or nay votes?
Nay.
All voting aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Hopkins and Cathy voting nay, the motion passes.
Making sausage.
Okay. We'll move on to the third reading ordinance of the National Electrical Code. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 15.28 of the Casper Municipal Code and adopting the 2020 NFPA 70 National Electrical Code.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Cathy. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. No duplication of speakers will be allowed. All right, doesn't look like we have anybody to talk tonight, so discussion. Any amendments? Oh, discussion. Councilman Bates.
Councilman Cathy, you brought up some good points last time. Did you get your questions you asked, or that, you know,
Mr. Sweeney? Yes.
And I know Vice Mayor Lutz wasn't here last week, but at the work session when this was brought up, Mr. Ellison answered all of my questions, and also in his email, these started off back in, I don't remember what the year was, but they started off in bedrooms. Now they've been moved through the whole houses, and actually by state statute, we cannot change the electrical code on a city level. So it didn't matter whether he answered them or not. We can't change anything by
Okay,
state
and I
statute.
remember that. I just wanted to
Okay.
clarify and double check what.
You bet. Nope. I'm a happy camper. Now that we're done with animals.
Any other discussion? Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, the motion passes.
Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance vacating Tract G Mesa del Sol addition as public parkland and approving a zone change of said parcel from Park Historic to R4 High Density Residential.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Cathy. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. All right, any discussion? Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
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 Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
11A1, adopting financial administration guidelines. 11A2, authorizing a contract for outside city water service with Arlo BC and Deborah KC. 11A3, authorizing a contract with HDR Engineering Incorporated for the water and wastewater utility RRA and ERP update. 11A4, authorizing a contract with the University of Wyoming for horticulture services. 11A5, approving an act of support for the CARES allocation model proposed by the Governor of Wyoming. 11A6, authorizing a reimbursement application to the State Loan and Investment Board for federal CARES funding. 11A7, authorizing an agreement with ALSCO for professional laundry services. 11A8, authorizing the creation of the Casper Youth Council and approving an advisory committee to and for the City Council. 11A9, approving the annual update to the MOU with Natrona County School District Number 1 for school resource officers.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So move.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Huber. Mr. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of the items?
Mr. Mayor, real quickly, the A9 item I'm really pleased with, and I just wanted to express my appreciation for the partnership that the school board endorses, that the school district works with us on this matter, as well as our police officers who are on campus and watching out for the safety of our kids. I really appreciate that relationship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any abstention or,
Could we
nope?
get a report on that at some point, Carter? Just a discussion of how effective it's been. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor.
No, it's okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Powell, we'd be absolutely pleased to be able to report on that. You bet.
Okay, any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
12A1, authorizing the appointment of Dennis Gazdowich to the Civil Service Commission for a 3-year term. 12A2, authorizing the purchase of a Ham pneumatic roller. 12A3, authorizing the sole source purchase of a Nilfisk floor cleaning system for Norco Company. 12A4, authorizing the purchase of a turf sprayer from Midland Implement Company. 12A5, authorizing the purchase of a front end wheel loader from Wyoming Machinery Company.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Bates. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Okay, at this time, we'd ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for looking at the animal ordinance. I hope that good will come from it. I really do, and I really, again, thankful for all the people that have came in, sit, listened, spoke, and that we heard what they had to say. So I thank them. The only other thing I'd like to bring up is, and I didn't at the beginning, and maybe next week or whenever, but we lost a member that worked at the landfill. Jennifer Burkhart passed away. I think we all got the email. She was with the city for over 10 years. You know, it hurts when we lose one of our own. Sorry, she was with solid waste, I'm sorry. Anyways, so I wish we would have took a moment of silence because she was a member of the city of Casper. She dedicated her part of her life to us, and so whether we do it now, whether we do it next week, but a moment of silence for her out of respect to her, her family, her 2 children, I think would be, I think they would appreciate it from us. So that's all I have.
Okay, Councilman Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that, you know, there's an old saying that don't watch sausage being made because you'll never eat a sausage. And legislating is a lot like sausage making. I think that we worked through this amendment to our animal control ordinance. I don't think everybody is going to be happy with what we did here, but I think that we did, by working through it, listening to everybody, taking everything into consideration, working collaboratively on it, I think we came up with a fairly decent piece of legislation here. I would like to suggest that on a national basis, everyone else should think that way too and listen to each other and not, you know, not be so confrontational and dogmatic and automatic in opposing what somebody that has a little different point of view might think. And so I'm really proud of the way that we worked through this as a group.
Councilman Pacheco.
Just a couple comments. The 2 amendments addressed my concerns, the criminalization of the feeding cats, and then Councilman Bates' amendment on tethering, which I was a little worried about the extent, how long, with the no time limit on it. So that allied my concerns, and so that's why I voted aye on that as well. So anyway, yes, I know sitting in that chair doing amendments, when you're the mayor and you're listening and going back and forth the discussion, it makes it fun and exciting. But anyway, just want to razz the mayor a little bit. So you did a great job tonight. Thanks, appreciate it.
Councilman Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received an email today, and I'm sorry, it was yesterday, and it's something that I have brought up at times, but it had to do with traffic around the city. I'm just going to read some quick blurbs. Risk accident at an intersection by someone who runs a red light. This isn't isolated any longer. It's a chronic problem in our city. Tired of getting yelled at and flipped off driving around Outer Drive from Poplar down to CY, where speed limit is supposed to be 40 miles an hour. Let's see. Yeah, my biggest concern is I don't see much enforcement from PD. Staffing problem, question mark. Then it says too, P.S. I want it understood, I back the blue, our Casper PD, and would support more funding if necessary. But this is becoming a problem with the running of the red lights, the ignorance, not ignorance, but the ignorance of traffic control, traffic signs, just common courtesy of the rules of the road. I run into that daily as well, and I've mentioned that about our double left turns. The people on the inside just want to take both lanes. And I don't know what we can do, but I would like to try to see something done to, and basically, it's a personal responsibility, but it gets back to what Councilman Huber said, that if there is no enforcement or no punishment, people do what they want. And I can harp here all day long, but was driving this morning between 2nd Street and the interstate, and a guy is between 2 out of the 3 lanes doing about 20 miles an hour, talking on his cell phone in his pickup. And everybody's kind of going, what's this guy doing? And yeah, they're a mess. And that's my big thing tonight. And I want to apologize for the people that had called me concerning the feeding, that we weren't able to stop the feeding of the animals. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
Just to address the flagpole issue that was brought up earlier today. There is no restrictions under the code that the ornament on top of the flagstaff is in common use from the assortment allowed by military regulations, including the eagle, acorn, gilt lance, ball, gilt star, spear, or flat truck. So we do have the proper ornament above the flag.
Thank goodness.
Just for clarification.
Councilman Powell.
I'd like to echo Councilman Pacheco's remarks. Nice job tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for everybody's information, we had the OYD Awards yesterday. We had about 50 people. And thanks to our city manager for being there and being the master of ceremonies. That was very nice, and you did a nice job too. So anyway, like I said, we had about 50 people, and that was kind of fun. I'm sure everybody's driven by the new state office building, but the southeast corner has brick all the way from the bottom to the top, and it really looks cool. It's going to be a beautiful building. So they're coming right along. I don't know, I haven't talked to the architect, but I'm pretty sure they're either right on schedule or maybe even a smidgen ahead. So it looks great. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
I've talked enough, nothing tonight.
Okay. I got a few things. I saw a post on Facebook that was talking, and the speed limit of Poplar and Collins, has that been changed? They said it was 35 down to 30.
Yes, I saw that today.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a big feed on Facebook. People were upset because it was changed. Nobody was told that it was getting changed.
That's why not.
Okay.
That's not ours.
Okay, so just looking for some clarification on that. So that's YDOT, that's not City of Casper. All right. Then I appreciate the fact that we got the sentry signs up on McKinley Street. I think that's somewhat taken care of the complaints that I've had up there at 10th and McKinley. So I appreciate that and appreciate the chief getting that done. And back to the OYD awards, Councilman Hopkins forgot to tell everybody that he received the Community Partnership Award for the amount of time that he has put in with the OYD committee. So congratulations to Councilman Hopkins. And that's all I got. So the next meetings of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. In the council chambers, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 in the council chambers. And there's no executive session tonight. So the council, or the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Kathy, second by Councilman Bates. Any abstentions or nay votes?
Nay.
All voting aye? Aye. Please record the vote.
With Councilman Pacheco voting nay, the motion passes.
Always got to have one in the crowd.